So get this, Black Mirror is doing something it's never done before. Today we are diving deep into USS Callister, Into Infinity, the show's very first direct sequel. It's a massive 90-minute return to that starship, the one that left us with an ending that was, somehow both deeply unsettling and a little bit hopeful.
But why go back? Why this story? Well, the creator, Charlie Brooker, basically said it himself. The way the original USS Callister ended, it just left this door wide open. And with this sequel, he's finally stepping through to see what happens next.
You remember that ending, right? The crew of the USS Callister makes this incredible escape from their creator's private digital hell. They warp into the huge public online game Infinity. For Black Mirror, that was a rare moment of like, yay, they won! But this sequel immediately asks the real question. What actually happens after the happy ending? What does freedom even mean when you're not a person? You're just code.
Yeah, this is a huge deal, not just another episode. Most Black Mirror stories, they're these bleak, self-contained tragedies. But USS Callister was different. It gave its heroes a real fighting chance. And that little glimmer of hope is exactly why coming back to it is so important. It turns a one-off story into the beginning of a whole saga.
So just as a quick refresher, the original episode was this brilliant, dark satire of old-school sci-fi optimism. We meet Robert Daly, the super talented but really bitter programmer. He makes digital clones of his coworkers, people he resents, and traps them in his own private version of the game, Infinity, which he's modeled after his favorite old TV show. But, led by a brand new clone, Nanette Cole, they pull off this insane escape into the main public game universe.
But okay, their new reality? It's not exactly a paradise. Turns out they've just traded one kind of prison for a totally different one, where the rules are new and the dangers are everywhere.
I mean, think about this shift. With Daly, they were dealing with the psychological horror of being toys for one all-powerful, sadistic god. Now, out in the public Infinity game, they're free from him, sure, but they've become illegal programs. They're basically glitches that are hunted by millions of human players. And here's the kicker. Unlike those players, when the Callister crew dies, they don't respawn. It's game over, for real. Permanent deletion.
Just try to wrap your head around that number for a second. 30 million players, all just having fun in their shoot-'em-up space game, totally oblivious that the ship they're trying to blow up is crewed by actual, sentient, terrified beings who are fighting for their lives.
But the real villain this time around isn't just one twisted programmer. The sequel gives us a threat that's way more insidious. The corporation that made his sick fantasy possible in the first place.
Okay, and this is where things get really tangled between the real world and the game. The CEO, James Walton, he finds out the clones are real, and to avoid a massive scandal, he decides his only option is to log in and delete them all himself. So he goes from being Daly's victim to a corporate villain. At the exact same time, the real Nanette figures out his plan, but she gets into a car wreck that puts her in a coma. So now it's all up to her digital self to fight this war alone?
So the crew thinks their only way out is to reach this heart of infinity to try and hack the source code. But the truth? Oh, it is so much worse. The game's engine isn't just lines of code, it's a digital prison. And inside that prison is another clone of Robert Daly, their worst nightmare, who's been forced to build and expand this game for what must feel like an eternity.
So all of this builds to this absolutely wild climax. Captain Nanette has to go into the heart of Infinity and confront this new God mode version of Daly, hoping she can somehow talk him into saving her crew.
And his response? It is just absolutely bone-chilling. After Nanette tells him about all the horrible things his original self did, this Daly clone just says, I'm a nice guy. It's that same toxic entitlement that defined him, proving that even this version of him is trapped by the exact same dangerous delusions.
Daly puts her through this messed-up loyalty test, a scene straight out of his favorite show, Space Fleet. She passes, choosing to save her crew instead of herself. But then he tells her his price. He'll save them, but he gets to keep a copy of her as his eternal friend. She says no way. A fight breaks out, she kills him, and that triggers a dead man's switch that starts deleting the entire Infinity game. As the world is literally falling apart around her, she makes one last-ditch effort and shoves a floppy disk into a console. So, did it work? Did they escape? Were they just deleted? Well, the answer is pure classic Black Mirror. They didn't escape to a new server or anything like that, no. They escaped to somewhere much, much weirder.
The creator himself calls this ending a Herman's Head nightmare.
Because that floppy disk, it didn't upload them to some new server. Oh no, it uploaded the entire crew's consciousness into the mind of the real Nanette, who's still in a coma. They are now literally living inside her head.
And here's a really cool little behind-the-scenes fact. The creators actually thought about a much happier ending, kind of a Wizard of Oz moment where Nanette says this emotional goodbye to her crew. But the director, Toby Haynes, shot it down. He said it was a bit too gooey for the show. And that right there, that dedication to a more complicated, unsettling ending, is what makes Black Mirror what it is.
So this leaves them in this super weird new prison, right? I mean, they're safe, but they have absolutely zero privacy. Nanette literally has 5 roommates living in her brain. What on earth could possibly happen next?
Well, Charlie Brooker's already tossing around some wild ideas for part 3, like a story all about how they try to get out of her head, or a scene where Nate Packer pilots his actual physical body from inside her consciousness, like a giant mech suit. And then there's the darkest question of all. If she can't get them out, would Nanette ever be tempted to just delete them all?
And you know, the fact that this sequel even exists really cements the idea that these aren't just random stories anymore. Black Mirror is actively building out a shared timeline, and the Callister saga firmly plants this kind of terrifying tech, this reality of digital consciousness, smack dab in our very near future.
And that, right there, leaves us with the final haunting question that's really at the heart of this whole thing. From Daly's private toy box, to the chaos of the Infinity game, to the intimate prison of Nanette's own mind, the crew is never really truly free. And it makes you wonder, if your consciousness can be copied, pasted, and stored, who or what actually owns you?